Hey everyone, Zian over here from Nintendo Life, and today we're here to share with you our review of Digimon Survive for the Nintendo Switch. Now, this review was originally written by Trent Cannon for NintendoLife.com, but was reworked into this video by me. The long wait for Digimon Survive is finally over, with players finally able to dive into this unusual entry in the series. Now, fans expecting the usual gameplay from a Digimon game might be understandably disappointed, but for those of you that have an appetite for visual novels and tactical RPG combat, there is plenty to sink your teeth into here. It might not be the best Digimon game that money can buy, but it is certainly one of the best visual novels to come out this year. From the heartfelt writing to the hand-drawn visuals, this is an exceptional title as long as you know what you're getting into ahead of time. While the game features creature companions familiar to fans of the Digimon series, Survive really stands out as a departure in not only the genre, but also the tone when compared to previous installments. Digimon Survive serves as a mystery visual novel with surprisingly dark imagery. Particularly in the opening chapters, the game is closer to a horror story than we certainly expected. There are even a few jump scares mixed in to get your heart racing. As the title implies, this is a story of survival, with player decisions impacting which characters make it to the closing chapter. Now, the game's central characters are primarily middle school students on a class trip. Their plans to visit some historic ruins are scrapped when an earthquake blocks the path. Instead, the main character Takuma and his classmates are led to a nearby shrine. And it's here where the students eventually realize that they're trapped in another world similar to their own. And with the help of some friendly Digimon, they hope to make it back home safe and sound. It's a pretty straightforward premise, but the game offers plenty of branching storylines to explore based on decisions that you, the player, can make. Siding with certain characters can boost Takuma's stats and even strengthen his relationship with other members of the cast. These stats will affect the ways Digimon digivolve and which boosts your Digimon can give each other on the battlefield. It's a really solid, organic way to make the visual novel portions of the game feel important and valid, rather than just a wall of text to chug through to get to the combat. Now, make no mistake about it, Digimon Survive is a visual novel first, with tactical RPG elements mixed in rather than the other way around. You'll spend the majority of your time reading and listening to the solid Japanese voice cast rather than fighting other Digimon. The first several hours of Survive are spent on the visual novel sections, and even though the combat tutorial takes place in this portion, it isn't until you get through the entire prologue that the battle system really shows up again. This long gap between combat sections early on in the game may be our biggest criticism. The pacing picks up from there, but it makes the opening hours feel slow when compared to the chapters that follow. If you've played games like Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics, the combat in this game will hold very few surprises for you. Positioning and strategy are key to victory, with Digimon able to boost allies or shield them from blows if they're adjacent to them. Digivolving can give your digital monsters a massive boost in stats and attacks, but it slowly drains their SP, so it needs to be used sparingly, especially in early levels. Most combat encounters can be beaten with a change in strategy, and we thankfully didn't have to do much grinding to overcome the combat sections. It would have been nice though if the combat didn't feel quite as tacked on when you compare it to the overall depth that the visual novel aspects of the game offer. But we can say what combat is there pushes the narrative along rather nicely. Most of Digimon Survive's main cast have a Digimon partner that accompanies them wherever they go, but there are plenty of other Digimon that can be recruited to your party throughout the game's free battle system. When you see a Digimon you want to recruit during a free battle, simply select the talk option from the menu and target your desired creature. A minigame in which players select a verbal response to the Digimon statements follows, and the correct responses will net you a better chance at recruiting them at the end. But the choices sometimes feel too random to predict, and even if you happen to select every single correct response, that won't guarantee that you can actually get them to join you. And if you want to befriend every Digimon in this game, you'll need to invest a healthy amount of time and repetition to do so. Now, if you thought the combat was the most threatening part of Survive, you'll be mistaken. As we mentioned before, the game's visual novel portions offer choices for the player to make that can impact more than just stats and affinity. Making certain choices can result in some severe consequences that build up to create a surprisingly mature and heartbreaking plot development. You don't expect such darkness from this series, but it works well to remind you of the cost of survival. While the combat in the game doesn't pack many surprises, the writing around it does. We're reminded continually that these are children in this harsh environment who are fighting for their lives. They come to blows and push back against each other, react harshly to the stress of their situation, and rally together in a wonderful way that is by far the highlight of Digimon Survive. You believe in the friendships you're seeing, and as a result, you could stress about how your choices will impact them. And the occasional typo in the text doesn't change the fact that this is a very well-written and well-presented story. When you're not fighting or reading, you'll be exploring the strange, time-displaced world the characters find themselves in. Most of these sections are easy to navigate, but they do offer the chance to uncover some secrets. The most interesting mechanic in the exploration portions is the use of the character's smartphone camera to uncover hidden creatures and environments. It will take several playthroughs to find everything that Digimon Survive has to offer, so if you're someone looking for a lot of replay value, you'll be set. Digimon Survive is one of the best visual novels to come out so far this year, with plenty of heart and tension to carry you through to the final act. Fans looking for an engaging story with well-written and presented characters that deal with life-and-death situations will enjoy the ride, while players focused on the combat will probably find that the game comes up short. Despite its sluggish, padded start, Digimon Survive is well worth the long wait that we all endured. We here at Nintendo Life give Digimon Survive on the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. Now, if you've made it to the end of the video and you still want to hear a few more things about the game, I have a few spoiler-free thoughts that I'd like to spew at you, since I've played a decent amount of the game as well. Now, I haven't played a ton of visual novels, but I really enjoy them. I've played the Ace Attorney games, I've played Famicom Detective Club on Switch, I loved the heck out of 999, and I recently bought Clannad on Switch. So it's not really a surprise that I'm enjoying this game probably more than others would. But I completely agree with Trent in the fact that you really do start to become invested into these characters and you really care about them and you want to make sure that they succeed, that they make it out of this alive. And the visual novel elements of the game are almost so strong that it feels like you don't really need the RPG elements. Like, I think the game would be just fine without it, but the RPG elements are definitely there to kind of boost the overall experience. But if you do go into this as not a fan of visual novels, as someone who does not want to read a bunch of text, I don't think that this game is necessarily for you. Now, if you've never played a visual novel before, you could play this and walk away with being a fan of a new genre. You know, when I first played Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney on my DS in like 2004 or whatever it was, I didn't know what a visual novel was, but I knew that I enjoyed taking people to court and screaming objection, and I loved the art style and I loved following those characters. And I do think that Digimon Survive has a strong cast of characters and a strong story that at times does take its time to kind of build up. But from what I've played so far, I really do care for these characters. And I think with a game like this, that's one of the most important things. And this game does succeed in that regard. Now, if I were to compare this to other adventure visual novel games that I've played, like Phoenix Wright or Famicom Detective Club, I do wish that there was a bit more going on in the actual environments that you explore. because it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of kind of sleuthing around detective work. You know, like you can explore and kind of zoom into certain areas and you'll find little secrets, but there really isn't a lot of stuff to find in the environments themselves from what I've played. You can discover extra monsters to fight or potions and different healing items, or maybe a journal entry that will dive deeper into the story and will tell you more about kind of what's going on. And that is all fine and dandy, but I wish there was a bit more digging around that you could do in the environments. Now, I don't know how long it's been since I've actually watched this movie, but the Digimon movie, which I understand now is a collection of like OVAs kind of cut together, at least in America here, was a fully featured movie that they showed in theaters. And that, as a kid, was probably one of the coolest experiences. I have such vivid memories of seeing that. I even remember, I think it was Real Big Fish or Bare Naked Ladies, I think had a song. Oh yeah, it was Bare Naked Ladies. They had a song in the movie. And because I grew up during like the early days of Pokemon, I was also a pretty big fan of Digimon. And the reason I didn't really play the games growing up was because I didn't have a PlayStation, and that's where a lot of them were available on. And the reason I bring this all up is if you're like me and if you experienced Digimon at some point in your life and you do happen to like visual novels, or maybe you just liked a mature story or you really dig anime, it's really special, and I entirely blame this on nostalgia, but it's cool that you can see some of these Digimon themselves come back in this new game, but in a different light, with a much darker tone. I kind of want to get into this in a future video at some point here, but I feel like we've never seen the Pokemon series do something like this before, and we may never actually see it. So if you've always wanted a darker Pokemon game, and maybe you've been a fan of Digimon at some point in your life, you might look at this game a little differently, and you might find reasons to enjoy it beyond the fact that, yeah, it's a text-heavy game with a bit of RPG elements. Now, touching on the Digimon themselves and kind of latching back onto that feeling of nostalgia, I think there's something really special about rediscovering these Digimon, especially as somebody who grew up with them. I don't remember a lot of their evolutions. Being able to add a Digimon to your party and not entirely knowing what they're going to Digivolve into is really cool. Like, I wish I could forget what Bulbasaur and Charmander and Mudkip evolved into. I wish I could forget some of their evolutions entirely forever, but what I mean is I wish I could re-experience the joy of discovering those again. And I think the bonds that you make with these Digimon partners are made even stronger by the fact that there's so much importance and weight behind the decisions that you actually make in the game. And being able to watch your Digimon Digivolve based on the choices you make is also pretty special too. I personally have had this game on my radar for a long time now. I remember covering it at the beginning of the year when we weren't even sure if it was going to release this year or not, because it's been delayed so many times. And so I went into this knowing that it was a visual novel. I like those kinds of games, and I think I've made that very clear by this point in the video. But if you are not like me, once again, this game just might not be for you. Just know what you're getting into. Kind of as Trent said, I think that's the best course of action here. So hopefully we gave you some solid information and advice that you can use to determine if Digimon Survive is for you or not. And of course, we'd love if you let us know in the comments down below what you think of this game. If you're going to be picking it up, or you're going to be passing on it, or waiting for a sale, let us know in the comments down below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this, then why don't you give that subscribe button some food and water, and maybe even a Digimon while you're at it by giving it a good old click. Give it a nice Digimon care package. And then ring that notification bell to be notified in case we need to let you know how we're surviving. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you to Trent for spending so much time with Digimon Survive for this review. I'm Zion from Nintendo Life. Stay safe out there, and we will see you all next time.